Welcome to Two Bees in a Pod. I am Bilola.
And I am B. Leonga, and this is a podcast about immigrant experiences in the U.S., sharing our perspectives on various topics,
including straddling cultures, fitting in, staying connected, learning and unlearning the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Welcome to this week's episode. It is the second episode in a series that we're doing on grief, and we have a grief expert with us today to go deeper into this topic, right? So welcome, Ning. And before we get into the details, we introduce Ning. We always start with an icebreaker. So the question today is, what is a food or meal that fondly reminds you of a deceased loved one?
So I'll have to go with my mom's favorite food, and she used to like njama and plantains. And each time she came to the US, I had to cook that for her. So sometimes jama, sometimes green. So yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, jama and plantain is not a combination I've ever heard. Wait, ripe plantain or unripe?
No, unripe.
Okay. Unripe, it makes sense,
Yeah.
right? Yes, I think it makes sense.
Maybe I should have said green, not jama.
Green, yes. Not then jama.
No, like
Nice.
spinach. You know spinach. Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking strictly jama. That's what the face was. Okay. So green and plantain. Okay. What about you, Bilola? This is a no-brainer. Die house corn and granuts. It's not necessarily that it reminds me of a particular person, but it's the one meal that I associate with like death and like death celebrations. So not even in a bad way, but when like, I don't know, it's like comfort food to me. If I go to a wake or a funeral, it's like once I get diascon and granite, like that seems to be calming. And I have to add that it doesn't have the same effect if there's no death involved. Like I would never randomly, as much as I like boiled granite, I wouldn't make boiled granite and corn and eat at home. It's like hence why I said die house corn and granuts. Like, so for me, I mean, this is not something that like I eat. So my dad, right, when he would come to the US, especially when I lived in California, one of my aunts would make like vegetable soup, some variation of, either egusi soup or some kind of vegetable soup, and usually eat with gari. But one time she made, that pounded yam. And he was not a fan. He was not a fan of that part. He was like, what is this mashed potato thing? Like, I always think of him like when I see that thing. And I've made it after that sometimes. I don't know if she just made it too watery, because you can manage with that sometimes when you cannot find but he was scandalized. He was like, what? He was not a fan of that thing. So like whenever I see it or whenever I would make it, like I would think of him and just laugh at that comment. Like he was like, is this mashed potato? Like, what is this? Yeah. I have many more stories, but we'll not start crying this early in the episode. We'll save that, for a little bit later. So our guest today is Ning Tendo. She is a grief guide and the author of Death Song in Green, which is a collection of poems about the experience of grief. And Ning is also a dream researcher and guide, and she helps people reconnect with their loved ones through dreams. So we'll talk about her work in that aspect. So Ning, thank you so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you here. If the audience is not aware, Ning and I are lifelong friends. Like we were just talking before we came on the air. We've been friends since probably 3 years old.
Yes.
Primary school all the way through Seka until you abandoned me after Form 5 and went to BHS.
And then we connected in Los Angeles.
We reconnected in Los Angeles, yes. Oh man, those were struggle days. I don't know if you have fond memories of LA. Struggling times. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have this conversation. Can you just tell us briefly about your upbringing in Cameroon? What brought you to the United States and what your experience has been like as an immigrant here?
Yeah, so thank you both, first of all, for having me. I am deeply, deeply honored to be here. And I think it's over the last few weeks, I've been like listening to your different episodes, and the work that you both are doing is so amazing, and it made me feel so much more connected back to home. So really grateful for you guys and for being here. So a little bit about me, I was reflecting about my background, and I have to say that I feel like I had a really privileged background, and I'm really grateful for my parents for providing that to me. I feel like, from a physical perspective, I had pretty much everything that I needed. Where my struggle was more on the emotional and the spiritual slash religious side of things growing up. And I think for me, I've always had that tug of war between spirituality and religion. In Cameroon as a child, I had 4 eyes, like what you say is like you're clairvoyant. So I was able to see the spirits a lot. Like I would have all kinds of incidences where like I feel like spirits were like hitting me, touching me, like all of these weird things. And it just went crazy when I went to boarding school. So I always had that struggle and so much trauma from that. On the other hand, there was the religious piece. My mom was super religious, like Catholic. And I remember she went to Lourdes once in France, and she picked ground from Lourdes, and she brought it like in a black plastic bag, and every morning at like 5 we would pray the rosary so that Mary can like kind of show up or something. So I have like stories. So like it was always this back and forth. My dad, on the other hand, was more esoteric. He would make us meditate. We were doing like mantras. There was incense. So it was a very, very interesting background growing up from all of those different perspectives. And yeah, I came to the US after high school, and like I said before in the beginning, it was a struggle. Like like we come here and it's like there's this culture shock. And for me, it was just I couldn't reconcile the culture, like how. And I think a big deal for me was you will meet somebody today, you guys have an intense conversation, you talk about your life. The next day, they walk past you as though they never saw you before. And I'm like, are you serious? So that was like a big culture shock for me. And then also just that struggle financially, having to work and figure out school fees as an international student. So yeah, that was, in summary, my background. Yeah, and coming to the US.
You said religion and it reminded me of something, right? So we used to go for sleepovers or what we call holidays at Ning's house. My sister and I, Limunga, and we were raised Baptist, right? My mom took us to Baptist church. My dad was Presbyterian, but we didn't really go to his church. And Ning, like she said, they were Catholic, and I've been fascinated by Catholic church, just the ritual aspect of it, right? The fact that you guys have a rosary and you count the beads, and then you have they do all of this thing in church with the, what is it? What's that
Yeah,
thing?
the
Smoke that
incense,
they,
like what? Yeah,
incense,
yeah.
So it's very fascinating, but we were not really familiar with all those things in Catholic church. So one time we went to church with them when we were having a sleepover, and there's a bowl of holy water at the door of the church that people, I guess you're supposed to dip and make the sign of the cross.
Yeah.
My sister thought it was the offertory basket.
So really,
She
oh
put
my
her
God,
money
I
inside the
forgot
holy
that.
water. Listen,
Yeah, I saw it.
man.
I saw a tweet one day that said, before you take your non-Catholic friends to mass, you need to have
Bruh.
orientation because the sit, stand, kneel thing.
Listen, I think about that thing all the time. I'm like,
No, I forgot that story.
Oh my gosh. No,
but
okay,
yes,
so this is where I would say, so Ning obviously does not, Cameroon is kind of small. So I knew of Ning even though I'd never met her. And my dad was very good friends with your mom. And so I think we got our visas on the same day. If I
Really?
remember, yes, if I remember correctly. And I remember both your parents came with you when you were moving.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, my life was privileged.
My dad, who listens to this podcast, and I'm going to call him out, who took me to the embassy, left me at the door. And so when I saw Ning and both her parents and they're getting visas, I was just like, wow, this is the life some people are living.
listen, Ning, let me tell that story about Ning. Ning's
God.
mom used to go to America every summer. Okay? And then they'll give their mom a list of the things that she was going to bring. A roller skate,
this one, that one. Listen, I used to see that things right there, and this I'm like, wow, must be nice. And I called myself out in the beginning. You guys, you did.
No, it was very fascinating, and it wasn't just one parent. It was both. It was the fact that both her parents were coming. Like my mom insisted that my dad take me to Yaoundé for that visa appointment. Chances are they might have put me on the bus by myself. And so for me to get there, and she was very happy. I was just like, wow. So this is the life other people have.
So, Ning, so you went to LA. I think you came 1 year after me, right?
Yes.
I
About
had been
6 years.
there, or for some months at least. Yeah. So you went to UCLA, you studied math.
Yes.
Is that what your undergrad is in?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then we'll talk about like your higher education in a little bit. But on the topic of death and grief, right? Do you have some vivid childhood memories of either the death of a loved one or coming into the awareness of death and experiencing grief as a child?
Yes. So my mom's best friend died. She died pretty, when you think about it, like when you're a kid, like if you're in your 30s, you're an old person. This lady died at 32. And in your like, I think I was probably maybe 6 or 7, and this like an old woman, but she had just had like a newborn baby. And she had breast cancer. And that was that time, like that was the early days when breast cancer was not really a thing in Cameroon. She had gone to the US for treatment, and then she came back, she was dead. Like she came back in a coffin. So yeah. And so I went to the wake. But again, it's like that's a testament to like the culture, because I remember that night, like everybody was just going there. I literally left my house at like 7, 8 p.m. at night by myself. And I probably traveled like probably like almost a mile to the house, the die house. And there was the wake going on, and I saw this lady laying there, and she looked nothing like my aunt, the person I knew. Her body, she got really dark. She looked a lot older, and the corpse was just laying there. And then like how in Cameroon, like the screaming, the chaos, like wow. And I just was like looking like, what in the world is going on? And I was by myself. I had like no adults, and so I think that just really hit me like, what is this? So that was my real first, encounter with death, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, on the episode that we recorded prior to this one, right, which we haven't released yet, well, it'll be released by the time this comes out. We were talking about that, like culturally, how sometimes you describe funeral festivities to somebody, an American, and they're just like, what the hell?
Yes.
It's very different. I remember when my sister passed away in Namundo,
Yeah.
and I guess in Bakuri culture, or that's what they told me at the time, like they don't put children in the mortuary.
Right.
So they decided to bury her the day that she died. It was extremely chaotic. Like my grandmother washed her body on our back veranda. Like, and it was like, I don't know, I was 11 years old at the time, and I don't know that I ever really processed it at that time. And then I went to Sika like a couple of months after that happened. So yeah, it's kind of a very jarring experience for a child that you cannot really, I don't know, and nobody is really holding your hand to explain. They're not explaining. You're just going along with you're going, because the adults too, there's a lot of planning involved, like we talked about on that last episode. You have to figure out, all these people are coming to the house, we have to feed them, this and that. They are making the house food, all of this. Nobody's holding the children's hand to say, okay. My mom did a little bit of that, to be fair. She was just like, that's just, her body, her spirit is not there anymore. Don't think about it like that. But we don't really have a lot of language to
communicate.
What's the word?
Yeah.
Communicate with children in particular, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of figuring it out by yourself.
Completely. And
I think nobody says anything. It's just like this thing is happening, but nobody's talking about it really.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, Nang, I remember, I came over that day, and it was just like, and because I had seen Namondo, I think we had just finished school for third term, and we had, and I was just like, and it was just pure chaos, as you're saying, and it's just like,
1 minute she's here, the next she's not. Like, what does that even mean, you know? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, like I mentioned in the intro, right, Ning is a grief guide and also a dream guide. But that's not where you started, right? When you left Cameroon on your immigrant journey. So
Yeah.
tell us about how you started when you got your degree in math at UCLA. What was your career? And then I know this story because you told it to me personally, but I think it's fascinating and very inspirational. There was some experience that you had that
Yeah.
led you to this journey, right?
Right.
So can you tell us about that?
Sure, sure. So I'll go a little bit further back. As every Cameroonian child, there's three jobs: doctor, engineer, lawyer.
Lawyer.
So I think my dad, like literally, he traumatized my life, no lie. Like every day, he's like, repeat after me, you're gonna be an engineer. I'm going to be an engineer. He will send me to the TV to go and fix stuff. I'm like, he's like, what kind of engineer are you going to become? So this was, because that was my life. And it's weird because I remember when I was 11, I told one of my aunts that I wanted to be a psychiatrist when I grew up. And I don't even know where I heard that word from because we don't have that word in our vocabulary in Cameroon. And this lady yelled at me. She told me, like, do you want to be mad? Do you want to be crazy? Like, she gave me the yelling of my life. And so I just sat that one quietly. And so when I came to the US, I started with chemistry. So I had my associates in chemistry. Then UCLA, it's even funny because I was going to do biochemistry. I was like, maybe I'll become a doctor. At that point, I was on the doctor path. And then a guy I was dating at the time, he was doing like some orientation in New York for Goldman Sachs. And these young 20s, they were living like the baller life. And so I opened their yearbook. I'm like, what did these people study in college? It was business, math, econ. I said, okay, I'm going to do math. I called and I changed my major right away. And so that's kind of how I went into math. And then I got recruited into technology consulting and kind of live that life, like traveling, working on Wall Street. And then as Enanga said, that same relationship at the time, it was a long-term relationship, about 8 years. And it was kind of going really south. It's that thing where like you're 27, you're at that like, like that threshold, like, am I getting married? What's happening? And so just so much trauma. And that's kind of where I started having like anxiety attacks, panic attacks. I'll go to my doctor and he's like, there's nothing wrong with you physically. Maybe you want to see a therapist. I'm like, okay. It was so bad that one night I had an out of body experience. And so basically what happened was I got up at like 5 a.m. in the morning and I just found my body floating on the ceiling in my apartment. And I was looking at my body down and I could hear noise in the apartment, like my boyfriend at the time was somewhere. And I was just freaking out. I had all my same thoughts. I'm like, just what the hell is going on? And the only reference I had to that was a movie I'd watched in the past called Insidious and was about possession. And so I freaked out and I'm like, I need to get up now. And I kind of went into my body and I was just like in this state of shock of like, what was that? And really that kind of took me on this path of like just exploring like, what is death? What is life? Like, what happens if you're not your body? What are you? Who are you? And so that took me to Peru. I did like plant medicine, ayahuasca. I went to Asia. I went around I was just going everywhere, just really exploring spirituality, consciousness, what happens. And I think that's kind of what got me really into dreaming because the out of body, the next step around that is like lucid dreaming. And so that really got me into dreaming. A lot.
So at some point you went to pursue your MA in psychology, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. So the journey continues anyway. So like I was doing that in parallel with still working consulting. But
Okay.
then again, I reached that, and this is again like that. I'm like, I feel like I've been really blessed in my life. I reached a point where I was like really like on track, like, to be partner. Like I had like a really great role, but I was depressed. I was so like, I had like this existential, like this depression. And I'm like, people in Cameroon, they'll look at this wife, they'll like, look at this one, like, you're making money, you're doing this, like, what are you complaining about? You
Mm-hmm.
know? And it's like that sense of like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like where when you've met your physiological needs, safety, self-esteem, and the self-actualization. And so I went again into this existential depression and I didn't know what to do. And so I went again, I took some time off and I went to Thailand in a sabbatical just again to explore. I was in Buddhist like monk temples. I did shamanic breath work. So I've like I did all kinds of, and I know people from Cameroon is like, this girl, like, wow, okay. So Bea, I need to hear your thoughts. She's just laughing and looking and like, okay.
No, I'm laughing because, like you said, I can't even explain. I can't even imagine somebody trying to explain to a family member in Cameroon.
Yes.
It's like saying, Ning to do it to America. Right? Like, but I'm not happy. You get money, you're healthy. What again? But I'm not happy. It's like they just
Right, exactly, And so like for people it didn't make sense. They're like, what is wrong with you? And that's when I actually started volunteering to in hospice. And so I would sit with people who were dying, like, and I just was attracted to that field of death. I don't know why, but I would sit. My mom was, when my mom was alive, she's like, Ning, like this one that you're with death the whole time. When I die, you'll not cry from. It's getting so used to that. But yeah, and then to your point, I finally found grad school, and it was a clinical psychology program with a concentration in the spiritual mind-body connection. And I really went there because I met my spiritual teacher at the time. He was teaching at Columbia. And so I had like a 1-year spiritual healing practicum. And so that's really where this journey, like going really deeper into working with grief, with dreams, kind of like just evolved out of that.
Okay. So when you were making this transition, right? I mean, like we've said, I'm sure, but it's not their business, right? There were people who were looking at you from a distance, like, oh, what's this girl doing? But I'm sure there were people who were close to you, like your close family, who maybe had some questions, some reservations about you changing your career path. So how did you kind of overcome, or was it something to overcome, or you were just kind of, hey, this is what I'm doing, guys?
I think, it's quite interesting. My family, luckily, everybody, like we're all like crazy in my family from a spiritual perspective. From my older sister, I think my younger sister is probably the most sane person among all of us. Not sane, like more practical, grounded. Me and my older sister, like spirit, my mom was like seeing like people younger, like my dad is into meditation. So nobody found him really strange. So like the immediate family, like, and I think my parents really trusted me and like they knew that I had like a good head on my shoulders. So my dad, me and him will talk about like psychics like for hours. We'll talk about all kinds of stuff. My mom, she always like to see me as a prayer warrior. So I made my spirituality was prayer warrior. So that was fine for her. So as long as you coach it in language, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think nobody really pressured me with.
You know what's funny though? Because you said that when you were young that you used to see like spirits. I didn't know that about you, but I knew that about your older sister.
Yes.
I didn't know that you experienced those things too.
Oh yeah. Sika was a nightmare.
okay.
Wait, Bill, because Ning and I shared a bed in Seka for Form 5. So you're telling me that we're sleeping at the same bed that you were sleeping?
No. So and that's the thing, right? You can close it. You can shut it down. And in Form 3, I had the biggest. I think that's when everything shut down in Form 2 or Form 3, where there was this crazy experience in Udom 3. I'll never forget. And I think from that moment, I just told spirit, God, life. I'm like, I don't want to see nothing. I'm like, so I think I like you can repress it. And so in Form 5, like in that time, like no, I was not. I shut it down.
What's that book we just read in Nanga? It's giving.
So we just
what is it?
butter honey pig bread.
Pig bread. Yes.
So in that story, there's a woman who's an Obanje, and she sees. I'm not saying that you're an Obanje, but
I'll take it.
That's wild. That's why I'm not gonna lie. I used to want to see spirits when I was a child. Like I used to, like have that desire to be connected to the other realm, the supernatural.
No, I have a question because everything I've heard about Sika and like spiritual warriors in Sika, like were they always like praying for you, or like did people like harass you in Sika about your spirit?
Yeah, so in Seka, I feel like, when I was a kid, I was pretty bad. I was really like, I was always strategic. So in the beginning, when with all the witchcraft, right, with the ghosts, I'm like, okay, I need to start praying because I don't want to be attacked. But then I found the people who were the most strongest spiritual were the ones that were getting attacked. So I denounced Jesus. God damn, with this. So I think from that perspective, I kind of separated myself after a while. I'm like, no, I'm fine, guys.
But then you're right though.
Yeah,
You're right because it was a super religious girls who were always waking up in the morning with stories.
exactly. So I saw that. So I'm like, I'm out, guys. I'm out. It's like you had a sign on your head when you were praying too much. So I'm like, no.
Right? I can't. I can't. Yeah. Oh man, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay, so at what point along this journey, right? So just to the audience, Ning's mom passed away the same summer that my dad passed away. I don't know
A day
how far.
apart. A day
It was
apart.
a day apart.
Yeah, your
Oh,
dad
I didn't know
died
it was
a
that
day
close.
after, probably less than 24 hours.
Gosh.
25th of June.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
when my dad passed away.
Yeah, mine
Yeah.
was 24th. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I thought
Mhm.
it was like a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Jesus. Okay. So at what point were you along this journey of your career transition and really getting to work with death and understanding it in that way where you had this loss?
Life is very interesting. And I feel like as I entered that journey, I was pretty arrogant because I was like, give me stuff. I was working with grief, but it's different like when you're talking and helping people, when you're talking from more like, mentally, like intellectually, as opposed to a lived experience. So I was studying like life, like I want to experience this thing. And then my mom died, and then I'm like, holy cow. And really, that was my biggest nightmare in my life. I remember as a child, I used to have severe anxiety. Like I would like if I could take a nap and my mom is not home when I wake up, I will freak out. Like I will have a panic attack. I was obsessed with her dying every day. Like it was really something. So that literally was my worst nightmare. So at that point, I got lucky that I had started grad school that summer in June. Yeah, in June. And she pretty much died like right when I started grad school. But I met that spiritual teacher in that community. And at that point, like my mom she had been sick for a long time. And that was just another whole nightmare. She had been sick for a while. And so I'd been with her for a long time, almost a year. And so I was leaving to go to grad school to finish my program. And the night before I left, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was on a journey somewhere. And as I got halfway into the journey, somebody came and told me my mom was dead. And I had to go back home. And in the dream, my spiritual teacher came in and he was like helping me. And it's crazy because I've always had like even precognitive dreams. And I've had like dreams like you can see. And so I called him that day and he was like, Ning, sometimes like healing is to die, it's not to live. So he was basically telling me point blank that my mom is about to die. In my head, she was going to die like maybe in a week or so. And he was like, can you take her back to Cameroon? I'm like, so you think I would tell my mom that we should put her on a flight to Cameroon, means that you're about to die? Like I'm like, what the heck? So I'm like, no, I can't. So she died that night. And she died that night. And so for me, luckily for me, I'd been working with clients already before, but not necessarily for grief, but from like a traumatic perspective. So I did a lot of breath work where you would use breath work to kind of like release trauma from the body and like process it. And so I've been working from that perspective with clients, though not directly with people who had experienced death. And so for me, I got really lucky because my spiritual teacher, he told me at one point, probably about 2, 3 months in, he's like, Ning, you have to go lock yourself in a room for 3 months and just allow yourself to be sad. Because if you don't do this, you're going to wake up at 50 with a midlife crisis. And so that's really when I just like, okay, we have to do this. So I schedule what I like to call crying sessions. And I would just like every day for 1 hour, I would just like let it rip. Like I would just go crazy and just let it rip. And I was really lucky at that time. I had the spiritual community I had at grad school. We were meeting every week, like once a week. So I had like this sort of container to like support me. So I'll do my personal grieving rituals, and then I'll also do with the group. And it's really sad because in retrospect, I realized how rich Cameroon is when it comes to rituals around death and like just really helping people to transition and make that transition into a new life. So like that was something I think it made me really value where I came from and my roots a lot more after my mom died.
Okay, so that was one of the questions we had, right? Which you've answered, is that you did have a community and you had
Yeah,
a professional in the form of your teacher to
yeah,
help you through this grief experience. So it's kind of how the timing worked out,
yeah.
it
It was
worked out
perfect.
for the
Yeah,
best,
yeah,
right?
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And you said something about like death culture and like rituals in Cameroon. Like some of it is really, really great. Because a few years ago, a friend of mine passed suddenly. And it's been almost 3 years. And I always wonder like why did that hit me? I felt like it hit me in a way that maybe even losing family did not hit me. And I think currently my current version is the fact that I talked to her the night before and I hung up saying, see you in the morning. She wasn't saying
Right,
she wasn't,
right.
it was really guaranteed that I would see her in the
Yeah,
morning.
right,
And then that just completely threw me off. But the one thing I was extremely grateful for in that moment was everybody was there because we were getting together for an event that weekend. And so we
right.
could all lean on each other. Before that, if you had asked me, I don't like when people come to the house when somebody dies, like, why are people here? Leave these people to grieve. But being able to grieve in community and have people who relate in the same way to this person, like when you're with somebody, it's like, oh, you lost your friend. They
Yeah,
might not understand who this person is, but when you're in community where everybody knows how amazing this person, like we all know we're crying because this is somebody who had an
okay.
impact on all our lives. And that made me really appreciate the custom of everybody coming, crying, screaming, and wailing together because it gave everybody an opportunity to release in that moment.
Yeah,
And Ning, something that you shared with me about your mom's, kind of funeral arrangements, right? Is that her alumni, um, is it Lords where she went? No,
yeah, Lord's the lessons here.
yeah, they were really very helpful and instrumental when you guys were taking her back to
Yeah,
Cameroon. And you had shared that with me how, they helped like organize all of that stuff. So there's something to be said, about Cameroonian community and coming together. Whereas I think when I see, at least what I've observed in America, it's more like the nuclear family that's taking care of those
yeah,
kind of intimate details. Whereas in Cameroon, it's more everybody's coming together, whether we're going to remove the person from the mortuary, we're doing this, we're doing that. It's very community based. Every aspect of it, yes, you will not be with your intimate family until well after the funeral, and that's when your
right.
mourning starts. But you still have that community that
Yeah,
helps you. And I'm sure for you, I mean, my dad passed in Cameroon, so we were just transporting ourselves there for the funeral, but you had to
right.
take your mom back to bury her. And that's
Yeah,
a whole other, I'm sure it's a nightmare. I cannot
it
imagine.
is. It is a nightmare. And yeah, just to the earlier point, in America, grief is in the closet, death is in the closet. People die behind closed doors. They die on TV. Like there's this sense of death anxiety. People are so afraid about death that they basically alienate and isolate people who are grieving. And like it's almost as though I always used to think like, oh, do I have chicken pox? Like it's like you're contagious. And so if people come near you, you're going to. And so for my mom's death, she died and it probably took us 2 months to take her body back to Cameroon. And the
Mm,
most traumatic thing is we went to Cameroon, so I flew with my sisters and my niece. We flew coach. My mom flew cargo. And yeah, and we went to like this all the memory. We went to the cargo. I never even knew how cargo looked like in Douala. We went to
Mm.
cargo and we were waiting in cargo. And that it's like and then but the beauty with the Cameroon is like her friends, a bunch of people, like they came and they were waiting there for the cops to come. And so then she was escorted back. And I remember when we reached Limbe, in the mortuary in Limbe, there was a sea of people. I don't even know at the gate, and they were just screaming and wailing. And I remember at that time, I was so angry. It's like that same thing that you said, B. It's like, I'm like, why are these people screaming? Like, I really hated that. But, in retrospect, I look back, and going through the journey with grief, like when we grew up, like in Cameroon, in Africa, we always hear about like Africa, Cameroon, like we're the dark continents, like, and people that said that from more of a derogatory perspective, like that we're inferior and there's this complex. But what, as I went deeper into the research into in my grief journey afterward, just looking into the rituals that we have in my tribe from Bamenda, you realize that, like in the West, like while they were spending time like exploring, like creating structures in the outer world, like technology, economical structures, we were actually like doing like more like creating structures in the inner world. So like more like rites, rituals, like so it's almost like mastering this sense of chaos and darkness and death and just making it part of everyday life. And really, when I look back, like all the rites and rituals for a funeral, like they're literally artfully engineered to really support a grieving person. And so, for example, like when a person dies, right? When you hear that news, like you said with your friend, there's this sense of just shock. Like you enter into this state of almost like a speechless terror. I don't know, Inanga, if you had like you're like almost like you're frozen, like the news does not penetrate, like you're just like frozen. And people can remain numb for months or even years, because it's just like the trauma is too much and you cannot process it. So you can like freeze for a while. In Cameroon, I realized like when you go and you hear people like those, I don't know about your tribes, but my tribe, Meta from Bamenda, I used to say that when God, people were starting the line to take gifts, people were like, oh, I'll be a musician, I'll be a poet. We took, but I'll be a professional mourner. Because that's, I'm telling you, these women, like the high pitch, the screaming, and then like the sounds, right? And I realized that when they do that, it's actually very intentional because what that thing does, like that kind of pitch, it breaks, it pierces through your armor, like whatever, like resistance that you had, like you're trying to protect yourself, it breaks that through. And then all the screaming, the yelling, the rolling. I don't know if you had that in your dad's funeral, and I'm like rolling on the dog, like your head, like like drama. And for me, it's always been like that's drama. But what these people are doing is, and these holding space, they're giving you permission to go crazy. Because I remember for me, I'm like, when my mom died, I was so afraid to cry. Because I'm like, if I start crying, I'll never stop. And like, I feel like it will kill me. I was really afraid because it felt primal. It felt like it was just too big. And so when people are screaming and crying, they're creating a sacred space, a container for you to also be able to do that. It's almost as though like they're helping you break the seal on your grief. And then that way it's like, and then all of those rituals, like the 4 or 5 days where it's just chaos, it's almost as though they're giving you permission to test the different emotions, whether it's anger, whether it's guilt, like sadness. And like you're testing it. It's like, like how you go and take a tequila shot and then you do a chaser with like salt and with like lemon. And so basically, they're taking the kick out of the grief because you're doing it like so you get to experience it first with people, and then that way it kind of like makes it a little bit softer. And then like in my even like the wake, when you have the wake, again, is bringing people in close contact with death. Like this is death, and we have this song that we sing in my tribe about death. Like that we're passing, and we sang this song my whole life. I knew this song is about like we're passing the world and it's just bringing death. This is the reality. This is what's going to happen to all of us. And we sometimes assume that maybe we have more time. You don't know, like you don't know. You think that it's not your time. And so, but it's bringing that into the consciousness. Like this is what happens. This is part of the cycle of life. And then we have this big dance in my tribe called the Akati dance, where it's like we call it dance with the masquerades. And again, this is really, again, it's like that community. I don't know if you guys have ever heard, like in the New Age spiritual community, they have like ecstatic dances. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like ecstatic, yeah. So like you have this like where you basically dance and you go into other states of consciousness. And this is kind of what that dance is. It's like you call it masquerade. So I call one for my mom specifically. And so you have the whole masquerades with like the mask, with like the cowrie shells, like the lawn, and then they're dancing. And I led the dance, and you're dancing around the grave. And in that moment, like there's this deep sense of connection, and you're dancing. Like I was dancing, and I just completely went primitive. Like how they say in Cameroon, like, or African, like that, we're primitive for this, but I went wild. Like I freaking like Bamenda, I was bare feet, red dot, sweat, stinky. I was going for it like fully. And like you enter into this place where you're dancing to honor life. You're also dancing the chaos and the madness, and it's all of this together. And it's just this really deep sense of like just a deep connection to the reality of this is what life is. And when you connect in that deep space with community, you realize it's almost as though like your grief, your pain, it's like almost like dissolving salt in a cup of water, but it's like an ocean of water, like a lake. And so the same quantity in a lake feels it's like it's nothing that dissolved because there's this big community. And you realize that everybody, like as you're crying for your own pain, everybody who's ever human has had this pain. Like there's a mother there whose child was killed. There's a short soldier somewhere who has lost his legs from war. Like everybody has this sorrow. And so when you really connect, it's no longer, it's not my pain, it's our pain, and it makes it less personal. And it's just that sense, that community space that gives the courage to kind of go that deep into your grief.
You know what? That is a perspective that I had never considered, right? Because, not gonna lie, I have talked shit about like people who are wailing at somebody, like you're not even their family member, you're crying for everybody. But that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Because if somebody is screaming, crying, rolling on the floor, it kind of gives permission, because think about like when we see Western funerals on TV, right? People are in dark glasses, they've held their place like that. It's very demure. They're being very demure about their
Very
crying.
mindful.
Very, very cutesy crying,
Hollywood
in the
tears,
West.
yes.
Yeah. But I mean, for us, like that, you're not going to be doing that cutesy thing when people are rolling on the floor. So yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. I had not considered it before, that it gives permission for you to while out if you want to while out, or cry anyhow that you want to cry.
Like you go banshee crazy, like it's fine.
Yeah.
Everybody going crazy.
Everybody's like, the day my friend passed in Houston, so we were all gathered, but they were trying to make sure the news got out in a controlled way. So making sure that close friends and family heard and they did not see it on social media. And so it's like we're sitting there. I was trying to be. So I had found out in the morning, I'm trying to have a straight face, right? Like have a very good friend now came to ask me, like, oh, have you seen her? I was like, no, I think, maybe she's coming. And then I remember sitting and I was crying. And then I saw somebody coming. So I had to I just burst out laughing. Like I had to act normal. But then I realized when the news had gone out, because I heard like 3 people just like burst out in the parking lot and they started. And so my friend who was my deceased friend's husband, so I remember they were coming and I kept saying, hey, they need to keep that crying at the door. But in my mind, it was like, I had talked to him. We were okay. I didn't want people to, and he was just like, let them be, let them feel their feelings. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Because in hindsight, why was I trying to control people's grief?
So let's move on to your work with dreams, right? So Ning, you help people connect with their deceased loved ones through dreams. And this is something that you have experienced, or you do yourself with your mom, and you shared with me. I've not had the courage to consult you and do it. But how did you begin that journey? How did you find out about this? Or is this something that you had just kind of intuitively known your whole life, or did somebody have to teach you?
Yeah, so it's a little bit. So I've always been a dreamer. Like I always when I was a child, it's another story for another time, but I had like a family underwater. So let's not even go into that one.
Yes. Not a mommy water family. I love it.
And maybe who knows? Anyway, that's another story for another day. But so after that experience that I had, like I told you, the out of body, I started doing a lot of lucid dreaming. And lucid dreaming is just dreaming when you're in the dream, you're aware that you're dreaming and you can control the dreams and you can do different things in the dreams. And so I had a dream practice for a long time. Visitation dreams, I'd always had people visit me, like my grandma here, this person here, but it was never really a big thing. But for my mom, 2 weeks after she died, right, while her body was still like in the morgue in Maryland, I had a dream. We're walking down the path in my childhood home, and she looked like she was in her 30s. She looked really young, really nice, really healthy. And then I asked her, I said, but why did you die? So I asked her, like, why did you die? This woman had the audacity to look at me and tell me that it was part of the plan, and the plan was perfect. My God, I was so mad. I'm like, was I part of that plan? Like, who gave? I was so angry, and I woke up and I didn't see her again for maybe 6 months. But really, that dream, like that sense of connection, like it just grounded in me that she's not dead. Like she's continuing. Like you cannot know, but when you actually experience that, like it's so tangible. You just know. And so for me, as the journey progressed, I realized that the skills that I had been doing in for lucid dreaming, like the different things to be able to induce a lucid dream, I'm like, oh, maybe I can figure out how to do this so I can connect with my mom whenever I want to connect with her. And so I was just experimenting because I've never seen this anywhere. Like I was just experimenting, trying different things. And over time, I was like, I can connect with her. And like, I have one very crazy story where this was around 2020. I was dating a Cameroonian guy. He is from, how do you call this? One of those tribes in Yaoundé, Francophone.
Ewondo.
My God, Ewondo. Ooh. And this is bad, but I'm sorry. In my tribe, that's like a no tribe. That's like a like, yeah. And I was dating this guy. And so my mom visited me in a dream. So she asked me, who is this guy? She asked me what's his name. So I told her. And then she asked if I told my father. I said no. She said she better not tell him. I should just leave it like that. Not tell him. But I introduced her to the guy. Like she asked me and we were talking and we conversed. You know, still like 4 months after the relationship ended. And I was super, I was like, not like how it is when a relationship ends, like the whole sadness. And I took a nap and this woman sneaked into my dream and she came. I said, hey, what are you doing here? She said, well, I came to wipe your tears now. I said, yeah, crying. Don't worry, oh. So I said, like, we keep having this, like, it's all like I have a relationship. Even this, my book I wrote, after I've been grieving for what she's like, Ning, oh yeah, let's go. It's time to work. That time to grieve has finished. It's time to work. So she's super, super, super active, like in my life. And it's a matter of when you're open to that and you invite them. And it really, I work with people and you can learn. People think that they don't dream, but everybody dreams. You just don't remember. You can learn how to do it. I have a program, it's 11 days. And most people by day 6, they connect. Like I have a lady who I worked with whose daughter, her teenage daughter died. I mean, a child dying is super traumatic. And it was something that happened suddenly. And so we went through together. And for me, like working to connect people with their loved ones that died is really powerful and important because what happens is that sometimes the thought of death and it being the end and all, like there's just this deep sense of hopelessness that just comes through and kind of catapults people into a sense of depression. But when you have that kind of connection, it kind of like grounds you, like it gives you hope and it empowers you, and then you can go on your grief journey. And even like working, the dream work is not only to connect with your loved one, it also is really a powerful like shortcut to work with trauma, with grief, like whether it's grief from death or what all kinds of grief, like things that you might spend years in therapy to resolve, you can resolve in one night in a dream. And that's why I love working with dreams, because they're super powerful, they're super potent, and it's like a shortcut. It's very direct.
And I've seen on your website you have, testimonials from people who have worked with you, and it has brought them, I don't want to use closure because that's not the right word, but what you're describing, right?
Yeah.
So as you're talking about this, I can just hear the Cameroonian say, demonic.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
So I don't know if you encounter, people of that kind of mindset, right? These religious people, people from, how our culture is.
Oh yeah.
Just kind of, I don't think it's not even like that they want to be haters. I think it's fear, right? Because when you're raised in a certain, you're raised in the kind of Christian upbringing that we were, and you're taught that anything that is outside of these two straight lines like this is of Satan, is demonic. So anything they don't understand becomes labeled, right?
Yeah.
So do you encounter that, and how do you, I don't know if you try to explain or you just let people think what they want to think?
Yeah, so it's funny because like I think this exact year is what held me back for the longest time. I was so afraid for people to say like I'm crazy or this one is a mad woman or what the hell, demonic. And I think that held me back that year because it's a real thing, like, and fortunately for me, I've not necessarily experienced. No, actually, I post a lot on Instagram, but it posts on Facebook, and that's where all the Cameroonians are. But you'll be surprised, actually, everybody is so into it. They're like, how can I do it? Yes, people are like, I haven't had anybody saying, nobody has had the courage to tell me that I'm demonic. So, yeah, I haven't had that, but I had somebody call me schizophrenic, and I'm like, sure, okay. So I'm like, okay. And so for me, and like my background, my religious background, as I'm sitting here, actually, I have my Mary with me. I have Jesus, like,
Not Mary.
yeah, I have Ganesh, like, I have like, it's a
Buddha,
mixed bag.
everybody.
I have everybody. It's a mixed bag, and so for me, it's like when I work, I connect with whatever spirit, people. You can call it whatever name you want to call it, God, universe, life, earth, like whatever it is. So for me, when I'm working with a client, I'm always asking them, what is your spiritual belief or tradition? And if you don't have one, if you're an atheist, I'm like, what is something that you believe in, the power of love, of nature, of life, whatever. Like, so for me, it's not denominational. And the work I do, people have had these like dreams or stuff like that who are atheists, who are religious, not religious. And so to your question, I'm sure people are gonna say demonic, and there's freedom of choice, thought, whatever, and everybody's welcome to express themselves. I'm just not giving back. I'm not engaging, period. Like, you're free to believe whatever you want to believe. So, sure. Yeah, so. But yeah, that was a big fear, which I think I've worked through for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe other cultures or other religions have that fear, but I find it like with Christians a lot. Like,
Oh, yes. Oh,
what is
yes.
this fear that you have of demons? Like, why would demons be looking for you if you're trying to connect? You know what I mean? Like,
Listen, no, although I will say though, Enanga, really, as I went deeper into this spiritual world, right? I mean, in Cameroon, we're not going to lie, we have black magic, we have witchcraft. It's a
yeah, but
big
why are they looking
deal.
for you?
No, yeah, like, why is
It's always chasing you.
no, it's true though, because if your energies are aligned to that, then you attract that one into you. It's like it depends on where your consciousness is attuned. But I'm not going to disregard like that stuff. But for me, I'm working with light or whatever. Like, whoever is working with whatever they're working with, I don't know what you're working with.
No, but I just want to because it's true. Okay, so I was raised Catholic, right? And I did Catholic primary school, Catholic secondary school, the whole work, right?
Yeah.
And there's I've always found prayer, you pray for yourself, you pray for your loved ones, you pray. These prayers that are always rebuking other people are a little different for me.
Yeah.
Because it's just why don't you focus on you and the things that matter to you? I don't know if that's selfish, right? But I'm praying for myself, my family, my loved ones. I used to ask my friends, give me your prayer request. But this
Right.
constant rebuking.
Yeah.
Why are you so focused on these things and not?
Negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so yeah, I don't even entertain that energies.
Okay, so how would
Yeah.
you describe your spiritual practice? It's kind of like a medley you're taking from different
Yes.
religious systems.
So I like to think of it like, if you have toothache, you go to a dentist. If you have a stomach ache, gastro. So for me, like I call them creative the intelligences. And so for me, for example, there's the Chinese Buddhist goddess called Kuan Yin. She's goddess of compassion. In Catholic, there's Saint Anthony, like for lost things. When I've lost something, I'm calling Saint Anthony. Like there's Jesus for healing. There's Ganesh, who's the Indian, the elephant god. He removes obstacles. So I just connect. For me, it's like a personal relationship with these different intelligences. And so for me, my personal practice, I do a lot of like meditation, grounding, connecting to the earth energy. So like really rooting. But it's really about kind of connecting back into yourself and whatever people want to call like the cosmic creative intelligence, like the life force, whatever. And then I will work with different intelligences depending on where I am or what I need. my root, I'm gonna say though, it's still the Christ consciousness, Jesus and Mary. Like those, that's like I grew up in that tradition, so that's still for me a root. But I like whether a person is atheist, and I will work with people, and everybody has different intelligences that work with them. And so I might work with somebody, and somebody might come through. I have no idea. I'm like, oh, this person is from this religion or from this space or whatever it is. And so being able to just like work with whatever is present, like the intelligences that are present for people. So yeah, no, I'm not focused. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Hindu. Like I just, connect in a way that makes sense for me.
Yeah, you're speaking my language.
How about
But
you? I was gonna ask, how about you, lady?
I mean, yeah, I'm pulling from many different places, right? But I kind of have beef with Christianity, so I
Yes,
don't,
everybody does.
I don't. But I mean, like I said, I like Catholics and your rituals, man. And the fascination with Mary, y'all are fascinated with that lady. People are seeing her in different places.
See,
I love it.
see, I can explain Mary. To me, Mary is a very simple one. It's mother, right?
She
It's
is
like
the mother.
it's just mother, and it's the same way that children are attached to their mothers and look to their mother as their first comfort. That's all it is with Mary. Like
Yeah.
she's the mother of Jesus, and so if you're looking to Jesus as God, what do mothers do? Mothers intercede. Mothers, like you're not worshiping her, but you're always begging her, like beg your son now. You are the one who can talk to him. So ask him to help me. And Ning said, I have to second St. Anthony of Padua. I might not be a church girly anymore, but if you tell me something is missing and you're entering the desperate realm, I will be the first to tell you to pray to St. Anthony of Padua.
Oh yeah.
Happened to me. I remember years ago I was looking for my iPod and I was swearing down. I looked and my friend said, pray to St. Anthony. I'm looking at her like, girl. She's like, just say it. When I go to the room and I found that thing under my pillow. I don't know that
Anthony.
I know that I had looked under my pillow before. So yeah, I might say I'm not super religious. I don't really go to church. But if you are looking for something, I will be the first one to tell you to ask St. Anthony of Padua.
Yeah, and I can give you 5 other ones for 5 other things. So I'm telling you, they help. They really
I get it. I mean, and I know what you mean about the mother figure, right? Like this kind of, I don't want to call it divine feminine because that phrase has been bastardized. But for me, I lean more toward astrology, and the moon is that kind of feminine mother energy, right? But so I really understand what you mean. But yeah, as a child, I used to be fascinated by Catholic. I'm like, all these rituals and the priest,
the communion, the whole,
No, like that. It is very ritualistic, and I love the rituals. Maybe there's some ritual practice in my future because I went to Catholic school and I used to love benediction just for how ritualistic.
What school did you go to before? What school were you before second?
I never went to second. I went to St. Bede's. I went to Baptist for 1 year.
No.
So where did you meet a B?
We met in Houston at a party.
It was I thought it was in Sinka, so I thought, you didn't go to Sinka.
No, I went to Baptist for 1 year.
I like you better for that.
Wow. 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 Now you're hating on the Sinka girl.
I know.
You're not that far off.
I mean, I be hating on them too, I'll not lie. Man, I'm gone off on a tangent. Okay, so what is the change? I know we've talked a lot about how we appreciate, Cameroonian like funeral celebrations, the community. But what is something that you would like to see different, whether that's in the diaspora here or back at home, in the way that we celebrate death, in the way that we process grief?
I think, like, for me, like, when something unbearable as death, like, meets someone, right? There's two roads a person can take, right? And a culture where, grief is in the closet, death is in the closet, it leads a person to go in the direction of anxiety, alienation, post-traumatic stress disorder, addiction, all of depression, like whatever you want to call that. And on the other hand, when you have a culture where people, are aware about death and they realize that death is not necessarily the end, it's part of the circumference of life, and it's an invitation actually get to know yourself more. And this is for me, I talk a lot about, like, my work for me, I talk a lot about the light side of grief and of death. And it's not to minimize the darkness, the pain, but it's to shine light on a part of grief and death that is really never spoken about. Like people are think about it, if you have a friend, a person, and they come to you and you approach them with like this sense of fear, like alienation, like they're going to react that way. And death is similar. Like when you approach death and grief with curiosity, with openness, what you realize is that death begins to shape. Like I like to say it's like imagine that you're living in a 1 bedroom house. And then one day you discover that, oh, my house is not a 1 bedroom, it's actually 4 bedrooms. And that's what grief and death does. Like when you let them in, they reveal parts of yourself that you never knew existed. Like I never wrote poetry really before my mom died. Like after she died, that part just kind of came on. That was the only way to express. And so for me, when it comes like a way forward, I talk so much about the light side, about visitation dreams, not to distract from the darkness, but this is because people are so afraid of death and the unknown. Nobody wants to touch it. But if you have, like, the more like I do the work, people are coming forward, they're sharing their stories with their loved ones. Like, as I help people, once you realize that it's not the end, there's that deep sense of hope. And hope is really what is missing. Like, there's this sense of hope and also a sense of knowing what to expect, or like not completely knowing what to expect, but kind of knowing that there's a way forward for me. And once you have that, it becomes easier for you now to go into your grief to process. And I feel like if you begin to have that awareness as part of life, it's not the end, then the culture begins to open up more to grief and to like creating like that space. It's not this thing which is like completely people are afraid of. So I think for me, big thing is that awareness that there is a light side. It's not all a darkness. Second thing is you can really, grief reveals what is authentic to you, to your soul. It literally reveals parts. Like if you see most people that have gone through death and really have been able to go into it, they always come out with like different worldviews, a different perspective, and it's almost like it enriches your life. Nobody is looking for death. Nobody wants to come to their door. But when it comes and you cannot change the situation, you're asked to change yourself and how you respond to it. And so for me, it's creating awareness about that it's not only darkness, and also how do you navigate grief? Like what are the different like contexts? So like for me, I look at grief also from they were talking a lot about the spiritual pieces. I really have explored grief from a scientific perspective, like what is happening in your brain, like the hypothalamus, like once you hear the news, like there's the stress hormones, there's all of these different ways, like this the brain, like the prefrontal cortex, like you cannot think, you lose your memory because your prefrontal cortex, which is really all about like awareness, reasoning, it kind of goes to the background while like the parts of the brain that process emotion comes to the forefront. So when you begin to understand what is happening within you at all these different levels, there's this sense of like there's so much like unknowns around death and grief. Like once you begin to know what's happening, it kind of makes it less intimidating, like less fearful, and you can approach it. So that's kind of my work, is helping people to develop a softer relationship with grief and death.
So we have some listener questions. We'll slice it up into reels and put it on Instagram as well. So the first question goes: how do you advise or tell the difference between grief or more complicated symptoms like depression, or something that you would actually need to see a psychiatrist or other mental health professional for?
All right, so this is like one of my favorite topics, and I'm so dark because I really like, I don't know why, like I just like, I don't know, but so for me, right, like, so first thing for me, depression, most people think that depression is the absence of happiness, but really is the absence of vitality. And what happens, like, I'm going to talk about depression within the context of grief and how I've seen that evolve in people. And really, the majority of people who experience death and loss, they don't necessarily need a grief counselor, or a coach, or whatever. People can process it by themselves. But then you have some people who, depending on the level of connection, attachment they have to the person who died, and the sense of identity that was attached to that person, it can really, really destabilize who you are. Because, for example, like as humans, we have a physical attachment needs for proximity, for emotional bonding, intimacy. And once that is kind of like, split with death, like most people like say, mother, you don't know who you are, loss of identity. And the thing with death and grief is that in our lives, as we go through life, we all have small traumas here and there. You go somewhere, somebody bullies you, somebody shames you. We're very good at repressing all of that. But the issue is that when death happens, whatever walls that you had kind of just breaks down. So all the trauma, so it's not only the trauma from the death, all the old ones that you have not, the backlog that you have comes through. And what happens is that people get super overwhelmed, like, and people don't know how to process all of this pain, whether it's the anger, guilt. And so because you get so overwhelmed, like you shut down, you repress these parts of yourself. And that's when the whole depression, like when you repress that sense of self, there's a sense of hopelessness. And for me, what I've seen with depression is basically a loss of vitality in 5 areas. So like there's a sense of deep exhaustion, like there's no motivation to do anything. You don't, you sleep forever, but you're still tired. And that's because you're leaking energy, vital energy, like your stress, you're processing, like your brain, like all these parts. There's that sense of numbness because the pain was too much. And so you repress the pain. There's that sense of meaninglessness because like almost like you defined yourself based on whoever that person was. And because they're no longer there, you have no idea why you feel lost. And so when there's that sense of no meaning, again, that hopelessness. And then you have this sense of you're not able to engage. You don't know who you are anymore. Like you kind of lose that sense of connection to yourself, intimacy to yourself, and then the whole society when people basically move on or think you should move on. So you're like basically in this cluster, and that's what people call depression. And when you go like to a psychiatrist, they're giving you medication. And what that means is basically like serotonin boosters to open like serotonin or to like improve your mood. But nobody is going to the root cause of what is the issue. Like, why are you feeling the way you're feeling? And that's why, for example, like it's working with like dreams, for example, with depression. Like there's this crazy story about this lady. And because depression is really about like the blocked energies, like frozen energy. And you want to be able to go and sit and bring up these repressed parts of yourself and work with them. And sometimes the energy is too big. Sometimes like, oh, this is like a really like big thing. And it's something that's really, I think it's really personal to me, how we work with this. And like, there's so many people that are struggling with this because it's like sometimes the pain that you come up, it's not only, most people always go like, oh, my childhood wounds, this wounds, that wounds. Sometimes the pain you're feeling is from the ancestors, from the family field. And so like even like that stuff, that's where like you're going to therapy, you're going to be going for years and you're talking about childhood wounds, but it's from like your past. I'll give you a very quick example, like working spiritually with people. A lady is struggling with anorexia, for example, and doing therapy, like trying to figure it out. When you go deeper from a deeper spiritual perspective, you find out that this lady's had a grandmother who was part of the Holocaust, and this woman was starving.
Sure.
She didn't eat. And it's a sense of identification with that person. You took on that person's story, you entangle it. And so, like, I'm not eating in solidarity. And when you're able to resolve that entanglement, and the person, like, can move forward in their life because they're stuck in the past. And so, for me, it's like depression is really a loss of vitality because we have not known how to process grief and we've basically repressed all these parts of ourselves. And those parts take away vital energy. And so kind of circling back to your question, like when do you know? I mean, if you reach that place, and really the first year, year and a half, it's normal to be depressed. I was depressed. I wasn't suicidal, but many times I felt like I was okay if I died. Like I did not really care.
Can I?
Yes,
There's
please.
a word, not a word, a phrase for that, right? Because I experienced something similar, not really immediately following my dad's death, but there's this thing where you're not suicidal, you wouldn't harm yourself, but you don't want to be here.
Yes.
There's a phrase for it that psychiatrists on TikTok said, and now I can't remember what it is, but that's a real thing.
It really is. It really
We need to
is.
talk about it more because it's a real feeling of, I remember vividly saying like, I would never harm myself because I don't want my family to experience, go through that.
Right.
Like, oh, but I was like, you know what? If there was a natural disaster right now and I died, I'd be
Yeah,
cool. I'd be cool with that.
exactly. And the thing is that also in society now, everybody is like, so like you talk about that, and you can't even express that feeling because everyone's gonna like trying to be telling you to go and call like somebody, like, call 911. Or I'm like, no, I just want to be able to express that I don't want to be alive right now. Like I don't feel like, and that's like a real, it's normal in grief, in death. And so if somebody is experiencing that, like it's normal. It's after, like for me, like now the people I'm working with one-on-one is people who are like 2, 3, 4, 5 years into their journey, and they're still in this place of like, I cannot do anything. My life is shit. Like everything is terrible. That's the people I'm working with, because 1, 2, 3 is normal. It's like it's a process that you have to like, and you cannot really. It's a process that you have to go through. Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
So another question was, can you speak about disenfranchised grief, which I had to Google because I didn't know what that was. And the
Yeah,
explanation that I see here is grieving that doesn't fit with society's it's not generally accepted by society, right? And our guest on our first episode, she talked about how when her mom died, her family was kind of looking at her weird because she wasn't crying. She
yeah,
was kind of expressing more through angry behaviors and being very antisocial and just, going out and doing things that people were like, your mom just died. Like, why aren't you
right,
like crying? And so I think that's one example of disenfranchised grief. And then also grieving about things that society normally wouldn't find
right.
acceptable for you to grieve about. So do you ever work with people who are
Yeah,
experiencing that?
I work with people like cat loss or pet loss, and Africans will be like, "What in the world?" You know, and
Thank you for affirming me because I said this thing on the last episode, and Bilola and Whitney were looking at me like I'm crazy.
no, it's a big deal. It's a huge
Yes, you
deal.
did.
It
You
really
sure did,
is.
ma'am.
Another thing for me, like with grief, like, and I'll talk to what you said before, but this enfranchised grief is also like this sense where people, like grieving people, like they want to make like there's a hierarchy of grief. Like,
Mm.
okay, I lost my child, so my grief is more like you lost your mother. Me, I would be like, I
Mm.
lost my mother when I was 20. So it's worse than you who lost your mom when you were 60. So like there's all of
Or
this
if the
like
person is super old, right? If the
exactly like
person
I was, you
if the
know,
person was old, I bet they were old, they were going to die anyway. Like they expect you to be grieving differently than if a young
exactly.
person had
Totally.
died.
And you know, and the thing with grief is that everybody grieves differently, and the grief, like I'm gonna give an example. Let's say you live in a house, right, like an apartment, and let's say death and grief is like a fire in your house or your apartment, like it's a fire that destroys. So somebody who you're super close to, who really grounds your sense of identity and your life, your meaning is connected to that person because they're providing many of your needs, whether it's physical, intimacy, emotional connection, meaning. And so, for example, it could be a mother who has a child. It could be a woman who has a cat, and that's for her, it's her child. It could be a husband and a wife. So depending on how that person is connected to you, let's say, for example, let me say me and I'm not close to my father, for example. If my father dies, knock on wood, if it happens, and I say I'm not close to him, this is a really bad example, but I'm just going to keep it so bad, so bad. It can be that he is like, if there's a fire, is this a fire in the kitchen or in the oven? And so your house is still relatively functioning, you're still fine, you know? If you're closer to the person, maybe it's more like your mom close, maybe it's like, I don't know, like a best friend or whatever. Maybe it's like your bedroom burned down. It for me is like my mom who died, the whole house burned down, you
Mm.
know? And so it depends on how you relate to the person. For some people, their cat is the whole house burning down. And nobody can tell you that,
Right.
how you're supposed to be. Like, it depends on what that person or that thing or whatever it is. It could be a job, it could be a marriage, it could be, whatever it is. And that's really like, and the thing is, I think there's so much lack of knowledge or education around grieving. And so people are wanting to, like, like, it's almost like this badge, like my grief is more than yours, or even
Yeah.
like you're crying, like let's
Mm.
say somebody like it's my person, why are you crying more than me? Like what is this type of situation? And so for me, it's like it's again is that because even in Cameroon, we talk about our rituals. If a cat dies in Cameroon, people will not do all these things I'm talking about, or your dog. You know what I'm saying? You will figure it out by yourself, you know. And so it's like even everywhere we have that where people like there's judgments, right? And
Mhm.
it's really for me, like what I would say is really finding that space and that community where you can, you feel safe and you can feel seen and your grief can be acknowledged. Because I've spoken to people who even in grieving communities, like I've even seen people like, oh, I'm a widow, I'm gonna work with other widows. But then even the younger widows are going to judge older widows that we have younger kids, our life, our own grief is worse. So like everybody is judging everybody. So you
I
really
get
have to
shocked.
get harder. You have to find your tribe, and it's not that easy.
That's true.
It's not
That's
easy.
true. And you talk about cat funerals. So there was a video on Instagram. This black guy, he posted, it was supposed to be like a jokey joke video. He's like, be mindful when you're making friends with white people because I'm on the way now to a cat funeral. And he's a video of him in a car, obviously, and everybody was kicking in the comments, but somebody wrote something that I thought to be very like thoughtful because he was like, are these actually your friends?
Yeah.
Because you're mocking something that to them they're taking very
It's the
seriously. I
world.
get it, there are cultural differences, and in you might snicker, right? But to
Yeah.
take a video and post it on social media, those are not actually your friends. So
Yeah.
to your point, find your tribe. If you
Yeah.
are somebody who thinks that mourning a pet is silly, then don't participate in that person's
Exactly.
ritual. You know what I mean? Like, if a woman has a miscarriage and you're gonna come and tell her, oh no, man, you're born another one.
That's like
Those are not like find people, and you cannot really control who is in your space,
right.
at times. But it's really don't go where you know that
You're not
you
welcome.
you guys are not on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, but so here, my friend had a dog before she had kids, and I would always say like, "Hey, how's your fur baby?" And she's like, "Oh, people get upset when she calls, like they get mad at pet parents when they're like my baby or whatever." And I'm like, "But that's your child now. Like you might not have birth, but that's your child. You're taking care of them. You're feeding them. You're spending all." So I don't know. And again, this is the thing with social media because maybe the friends were like. The fact that they were going to the cat funeral, I think that says something. They didn't just sit at home kicking that the person, because I think that I'm the kind of crazy I might not look at a cat funeral like a really family human funeral, but I will show up and do the utmost most, be extra as hell.
Yeah.
I would too.
Yeah. No, but me personally, I will not find that video funny if it was my friend coming to my
If
cat
my friend
funeral.
did that, right?
I will not find it funny. It's not funny. It's not funny.
I wouldn't either. Now, would I personally
I'm
have
a
a
cat
cat
mama, so
funeral?
I'm not playing that.
Listen, me too. I'm a cat lady. Would I have a cat funeral? No.
No,
But if
yeah.
I'm making fun of me, I'll cut you off.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. That's grounds for dissolution of friendship. So we had a couple of dogs that died when I was younger, and we took our animals a little too seriously in the Cameroon sense, right? Because I remember once we were sitting and watching TV with a dog, and somebody complained. I said, "But this is the dog's house. If you don't like it, you leave." The dog needs.
That's a good one, though. That's really good. Like, excuse me.
Why are you going to Speaking of dogs, Ning, R.I.P. Mickey.
Oh no. Mickey visited me in my dream.
Not Mickey visiting you in your dream.
It's not Mickey.
Please say hi to him. Mickey terrorized
Everybody, me too. I have scars on my body from this dog.
You got it right.
Boy. Your geese terrorized me.
I'm still afraid of ducks and geese. When I was pregnant, I was like, I almost said 10 months pregnant. Then the internet would have been judging me. When I was like 8, I don't even remember. Maybe it was 8. But I was like really pregnant. I parked my car one day. Ducks, all of them were standing. Help me! And my pregnant stomach left the driver's seat to the passenger side because there was no way I was going to open the driver's door and fight with dogs. To this day, I don't know how I did it, but me and my stomach came out on the passenger side.
Oh my God.
So this is the other listener question. What is the most helpful thing you were told by a friend, or is the most helpful thing a friend did for you when you were grieving?
So I think I spoke about the most helpful thing my teacher told me, but I'll talk about friends. That was a big one. I was in grad school when my mom died. And I think in that our Cameroonian culture, like how when somebody dies or you have an event or you have something and then you have friends that they just show up as though like they're your sisters or like they're your family, like they come in, you know. And so I had friends that were Cameroonians who I kind of expected that way to show up, but then they show up to. My mom did a memorial in Maryland before we came to Cameroon. They pretty much showed up to the event like guests, like everybody else. But I had this friend from grad school who I had just met. It has been like 8, 9 months, a year. This girl, she's white, she's as white as they come. This girl came from Courtney. She took the bus from New York to Maryland. She came to my house, our die house in Maryland, and she entered the kitchen and she started cooking and cleaning. My dad was telling her stuff and crying on her shoulder. You know, yeah, she came to the funeral that day. She was in the kitchen. I don't know how like how when you have white people in a crowd of like Cameroonians, the person stands out like, I don't know, another thing like this, the spiritual people, she blended in. I don't know, she camouflage. I don't know me how she did it, but she camouflage because she was like, but it was because she was like in the kitchen. She came back to the house. We all slept on the floor, like 5 of us in one room on the mattress on the floor. She came and she just kind of went into the whole thing as though, And so for me, like that touched me. Like my Cameroon friends, they gave me money. Like not like how in Cameroon they gave me quite a lot of money and I was deeply grateful. But I think for me, I needed that person like that showing up at that level, like we're in this together. And I think for me, that's what we need. Like if you know somebody who has lost somebody and you're a friend, if you can just be there, you don't have to know what to say or say anything. You don't have to make it better, but nothing you can say that will make anything better. You want to just sit there. Like if you want to cry, I'll cry with you. I will sit here, and that presence is healing, very healing. So for me, like that was precious.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Shout
Imelda,
out
what's
Courtney, but that's a
yours?
really good. What a friend!
Yeah, I
Oh
want to hear
man,
you.
the friend has
You've
told her
talked about it
something.
before.
When I was grieving.
You said either somebody was it you sent you a cleaning person when you just
Yes. Yeah. So when I think I had come back, but yeah, somebody, and I was not even close to this person. I had met them one time on a trip that I took to visit somebody else, and they ordered a cleaning service to come and clean my apartment.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really
Wow.
touched. I was
That's
really touched by
beautiful.
that. Yeah, because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but for me, and this person never know me that well, but for me in particular, like when up here is, in chaos and my surroundings are not like put together and pristine, like it just makes it worse. It's kind of
Yeah.
like a positive or negative feedback where it's like
Right.
everything, it's just, yeah. So that was really touching, and it's something that I would have never like expected or even thought of that.
Yeah.
And to your point, like, the Cameroonian community like really came together and, gave like my older brother's friends my older brother passed away, but so when my dad passed away, like a group of them came together and like they put together a lot of money that really like helped. So it was kind of, yeah. So yeah, to your point, Ning, the Cameroonian community like really showed up. My class, the Sika girls did their thing.
Yeah.
The uncle, I don't want to call them uncles, but the big
Yeah.
men
Yeah. They
did their
showed
thing.
up.
Yeah, and yeah, we didn't have anything in America. I didn't want to do
Yeah, I
that.
mean, even that wasn't here. Like, it didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, when we went back home, it was, I don't know. Did you guys bury your mom? You buried her in Bamenda, right?
Yes.
But you had like something in the house in
Limbe.
Limbe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that people always being in the house, like you wake up in the morning, like visitors are coming and they're bringing food. Like our freezer was full. Like,
Yeah.
and I shared on the last episode, one lady cooked one cabbage that, listen, and see, and nobody knew who she was. This kind of thing where people are bringing food and then you're not
You
keeping
don't even
track,
know
right?
who brought what. Yeah.
See, that's how we're sitting. And I wish Auntie brought this cabbage. And when she figured it out because she came and took her flask quietly, and we never figured out that Auntie who made that delicious cabbage,
Where?
ask her for the recipe. But yeah,
So it was, I mean, there was not one single thing that for me like really stood out. That cleaning thing, definitely, but just the way that people showed up,
Yeah.
in person and financially, yeah, it was very touching. Question for you, like since we're talking, so how was your journey like after like that, like that intense period, like the first 3 months when everybody's there, and then afterwards when everything quiets down, like people kind of go back to their lives, like how was the journey for you, and like how did you process, how did you cope? It was difficult, right? Because you're coming back to America and all of my sisters are going
It's just
their own ways. I just have one sister with me here in Houston, but we left our mom in Cameroon. So it was hard, but like I had started going to therapy a year before, so my therapist was really, really instrumental.
Oh, that's powerful, yeah.
In helping me, like, and I think the following wasn't in 2019 when I came to New York and we hung out, right?
Maybe, yeah, I think so.
I think it was 2019 because the
Yeah.
following year was a pandemic. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, like I'm still on the journey, to be honest. It's
Yeah.
just the road has changed. Let me say that. In the beginning, it's like one
Chaos.
poto road
It's chaos.
that you're pushing the car, and then after that, it becomes more of like a smoother,
Right.
highway, so to speak. But I don't think you ever exit the road of
No,
rage.
don't think so. I would
Yeah.
say though, like for somebody who has not experienced like parental loss or something, what I've learned from my friends and I try to put in practice is so a friend of mine said, don't say, what can I do for you? Like in grief, the person is already overwhelmed and then you're putting that burden of them. Maybe they don't even like to ask for help. Then imagine when they're grieving, having to come. So if there's something that you can do and you know that it's needed, right? Just say, hey, I'm going to do this thing and take it off from them instead of like having them. Because people are like, oh, but I don't know. Like just say, hey, I'm doing this thing. I don't know what it is about me and feeding people. The thing that I've done for a lot of people is feeding them. So when my friend passed away, we came back, but her husband, my friend, was in Houston, and I knew he liked Jamaican food, and it was their daughter's half birthday. Again, I'm overdue. So it was like I asked one friend to take balloons and a cake so that everybody was going to be distracted and celebrate her half birthday. And I knew that he really liked Jamaican food. So I sent Jamaican food that day. My friends, when they lost their dad a few years ago, I'm friends with like 3 of the sisters. So I was like sending food to every house. Like, okay, you guys have guests. I sent bagels to one house. I sent like what I thought was comfort food. I actually ordered food in Lagos for when they were in Lagos just because it's like, you're running around. You might not have time. I didn't know what it was like on the ground. So that was my own version of I'm going to show up in your house with food. And I think like here, we might not live in the same city, but like I said, a cleaning service, Instacart, DoorDash. If you can't start
the person's child, children.
start a meal train service for your friend, right? Like everybody, if you cannot cook food and drop it off, then send them DoorDash. So like they're grieving, it's just like, hey, here's a gift card to do that. They always need water, groceries, essentials. Send that to your friend if you cannot show up. But like these are the little ways you can show up instead of, saying, oh, I'm here if you need anything. They need. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm here if you need anything. That phrase. Has anybody ever come out?
Yeah.
Nobody does it, right?
Nobody.
Nobody's gonna hold you to that. I mean, it's well-meaning, right?
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
True that.
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, this has been a really good and a really good conversation, an emotional one.
Yes, yeah.
We have been speaking with Ning Tendo. She is a grief guide, a dream researcher and dream guide, and her book, Death Song in Green, is available on Amazon. It's a book of poetry. I didn't ask, but how did writing this book help in your healing journey, or did it?
It was my whole journey. If you read the book, it like goes from the dark side, from the shock to when she was dying, to like it's literally the whole journey. And that's, I think, like when I was doing like those crying sessions, this is how I process grief. And if you like see like some
poems are about anger, some poems about denial, about shock, about feeling depression. Like, and really, that's the thing. Like with grief and the pain, you need to make it something outside of yourself. You need to make it something solid in the world and to express. And when you express it, it becomes something different. Like, and I'm going to share one poem there. It started out, I'll share the story because it's quite interesting with our culture too. I remember when my mom that I was super angry with God. And I'm just like, this is bullshit. Like, what nonsense. I was so pissed and I wanted to curse God so bad. But, like that Catholic girl, like, by the time you remember when they tell you that if you curse God, you're going to go to hell or
So
whatever,
that fire you.
fire, like I want to curse, like it was so, but then I could feel the pressure, like a pressure cooker I was mounting at some point and let it rip. I cursed the heck out of God. And the poem I wrote was when God was a dictator. And I gave it to him. I gave it to him. I gave it like it was so bad. But as soon as I expressed all of that anger, I felt completely depleted. I felt so peaceful. And the thing is that the grief, the different voices within us, they just want to be heard and to be seen and to express. And as soon as you give them room and acknowledge them, they change. And trust me, God, universe, life, He can handle it. She can handle it. It's fine. Like they're okay. And so that poem is not called God is a Dictator, but it's still in there in a very different form. But it's there. But that's like poetry for me was so much part of that journey of like processing and also dreams. Many of the poems came from dreams. Like it was true dreams, like they were just downloaded from dreams. And that's why my mom, I think that was in 2021, she's like, okay, Ning, you have to like wrap this journey up. And the way to wrap it up is publishing the book and like editing. And so it was another big journey to edit the poems. It took me about a year to edit them out. Like, so that was for me, my container for grief. And people is so important to find an outlet for your grief. It could be art. Art is a really powerful way to express grief and just to give faces to the different aspects of the grief within you. So yeah, it's super important.
And you can find Ning on Instagram at Ning_Tendo. That's NING_TENDO. And her website, which you can link through her Instagram, is dreamreunions.com. And make sure you're following us on Instagram at 2bspod and on YouTube at 2bs in a pod. And if you've been reading along with us, our September book of the month is My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite.
Ooh.
And until next time,
Sense no be that so for one man. Literally, sense doesn't belong to one person.
intelligence now. Sense
Sorry,
in pidgin is intelligent. Why, Bilola? Your pidgin translation skill.
intelligence doesn't belong to one person.
So, Ning, what's your interpretation of that proverb? Sense no be that so for one man.
I feel like everybody has a story. Like there was this thing, go placidly and meet the noise and
Meet the
haste,
noise and
desiderata.
haste.
I love that, like, and like even the dull and ignorant, they too have their own story. So for me, it's, I think
Not the
everybody
dull
has.
and ignorant.
Yes,
That's what they say
it's
in
in
there. Like, even
there.
I swear, it's not my words. But I think for me, my interpretation of that, everybody has their story, no matter what perspective or where they're coming from. And so it's just really being open and curious to understand the person, the intention behind the words. So it's like we all have pieces to the puzzle, like to this universal pie. That's kind of how I interpret that.
Yeah, I agree, right? You can learn something from everybody, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe don't be quick to judge people that kind of are outside of your culture, or if you think they're dumb.
Yeah.
You can learn something from everybody.
Ning has taken me back with this desiderata. I don't know why. In my Form 3 class, and I think Form 3 to Form 5, we had it in class, and people used to quote whatever suited their agenda that day. Because Ning said, speak your truth quietly and clearly and listen to others, even to the dull and ignorant. They too have their story. And then there was a teacher who used to like this one, say, take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. That one is like secret. I don't know why, but in my class, if you did something, they'll be like, gracefully surrender the things of youth.
Yes, what is that though? What is that?
The desiderata.
It was on the bathroom in
Desiderata?
my parents' bathroom on the wall. So each time he goes to the bathroom,
No, avoid loud and vexatious people.
aggressive people. They were vexatious, the spirit. Oh, I memorized the whole thing. It was ridiculous.
That's so funny. I had a desiderata poster on my wall in college.
Mm,
You
right
did.
work.
I bought it. I put it on the